Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm engineer James Fairfoot. It is an honor to welcome you. I am the director of the company Sports Art, a leading company in the world with almost half a century of technology. We designed the first elliptical with an intelligent motor 15 years ago. On this occasion, I want to share with you a comparative analysis of the existing alternatives in the field of medical rehabilitation. This research work is based on the locomotion training programs that are carried out at the Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital located in the United States. It is one of the world's leading institutions in research, education, and clinical practice in the area of neurorehabilitation. Our starting point will be the principles of neuroscience and motor neurorehabilitation. We will talk about how neuroplasticity allows the brain to reorganize itself, and the principles discovered and deepened several decades ago to stimulate this process. Let's review current strategies, the challenges faced by physiotherapists, and limitations in methods. Finally, we will see what technological options are available. They can be integrated into clinical practice and how they offer opportunities for functional rehabilitation and quality of life for our patients. You are all welcome. Start. Multiple investigations have been developed in order to confirm, expand, and summarize the neuroscientific principles that allow the brain adaptation process to be enhanced. The fundamental principles of motor neurorehabilitation are the specificity of the task. The objective is to recover walking, to replicate it as faithfully as possible, repetitions. And brain neuroplasticity requires hundreds or thousands of steps. Intensive practice is key to reprogramming the brain and motivation and challenge. With active participation, the body must be demanded beyond its current capacity. It is essential to start as soon as possible. The active participation of the patient should always be guaranteed by maintaining an appropriate challenge and active muscles, heart, and brain. Dual training to simulate the real world is critical. The final integration and the fundamental principle, which is the active participation of the patient. Only in this way is it possible to integrate movement, sensation, and cognition in the same therapeutic process. Now, let's look at the rehabilitation options available below. Let's start from the basics and progressively move towards the most technological. Firstly, we find manual or basic rehabilitation, commonly known as the BOBA or neurodevelopmental method. Here, the physiotherapist works directly with the patient's limbs, applying manual techniques to guide the movement. The next option is treadmills with a partial weight-bearing system. In this case, the patient is supported by a harness accompanied by physiotherapists who manually assist the movement of the legs. Slow reproduces the gait pattern. Finally, at the most advanced level, we find robotic technology. These systems allow for more accurate reproduction, automation, and repetition of gait movements, reducing the physical effort of the physiotherapist and offering the patient longer, safer, and reproducible sections. The first basic rehabilitation option includes the neurodevelopmental method or BOVAD, along with traditional physical rehabilitation that uses balls, rubber bands, mats. This approach may eventually lead the patient to the use of gateways to stimulate walking. Now, once the patient reaches the catwalks, a fundamental question arises. What happens when we need the patient to actually walk with hundreds of step repetitions? Here we find the limitation. The walkways measure on average 3 meters 10, and an average adult measures between 1.5 to 1.7 meters. This means that in each journey, the patient can only take 5 or 7 steps. This is not much in total per session. Now, following the step after the runway training is to take the patient to a treadmill with a partial weight-bearing system. In this phase, walking is simulated by holding the patient by means of a harness and the physiotherapist manually moving each leg. Each lower extremity of the patient weighs approximately 15% of the body weight. In an average individual of 100 kilos, each leg weighs about 15 kilos. Here is illustrated the skeletal movement of each physical therapist placed on each leg. The position in which it works is not ergonomically adequate, as they must remain rotated and bent. The gait pattern is not optimal, nor is it reproducible. It requires several professionals, which is physically strenuous. Below, we will see a video with different rehabilitation teams. And I want to ask you this question. Which ones really comply with the principles of neurorehabilitation? We must look at whether they allow hundreds of repetitions for neuroplasticity, if they emulate walking in a real way, if they generate challenging and high-intensity efforts, and if they incorporate the cognitive aspect of the patient. It is also important to analyze how much effort the physiotherapist requires, what level of safety he offers, and whether he adapts to different levels of mobility. In the case of the skeletons, let's ask ourselves this question as well. How much do thousands of repetitions really achieve, and with what intensity? And what is the challenge that neuroscience demands of them? Now, let's go back to our original slide. All these factors finally lead us to a decisive element, which is cost-benefit. In the clinic, this. It means asking ourselves, how many patients can a machine attend per day? How much physical effort does the therapeutic team require? And what is the return on investment, not only in financial terms, but also the impact on the population served? In other words, it is not a question of whether the equipment complies with the neuroscientific principles, but of how it manages to do it, which manages to do it in a more efficient, sustained way, and that it is an affordable price. In the following analysis, we will see how each option relates to these principles. You can conclude for yourself which one offers the best cost-benefit ratio. Considering the goals of rehabilitation, we return to the principles of neuroscience. First, the specificity of the task. It must emulate the march efficiently possible. And second, we need a lot of repetitions, hundreds of steps to achieve neuroplasticity. Third, the active participation of the patient, including the cognitive aspect through multiple tasks, and the real perception of movement is basic. So what does this mean in practice? How do we ensure controlled movement? How do we accurately and repeatedly perform massive repetitions that are the basis for creating neuroplasticity? How do we simulate the real world? Cardiorespiratory focus and effort. Now, how can we achieve all this? The only way to get controlled movement in hundreds of reps is through a robotic system. Because a mechanized system allows the necessary steps to induce neuroplasticity to be executed with precision. The rest of the components, the cognitive aspect, high-intensity cardiovascular training, it can be achieved through multitasking, cognitive, virtual reality, complementary cardiorespiratory exercises. In conclusion, to achieve the objectives of robotic rehabilitation, it becomes an essential tool. The only way to guarantee controlled movement, massive repetitions, and a reproducible gait within an environment that also integrates the cognitive and the physical. The Lokomat makes it the ideal system in this scenario, designed for hospitalized patients with very little mobility and high dependency. Now, on the other hand, patients with greater mobility and low dependence, on the contrary, when the patient is already more mobile, makes them ideal patients for eye care because they are patients who can already be standing, move your trunk, hip, knee, and maintain some balance. This is where Sport Arts Eye Care comes into play. Eye care offers a more spacious and realistic environment. The comparative summary in conclusion. The Alcomat is indicated for low mobility and high dependence, while the eye care responds better to greater mobility and low dependence. In this way, Lokomac serves critical patients in hospitals, and eye care is projected to a wider market. A market where there is post-surgical rehabilitation, external clinics, even home programs. Well, I think we're coming to the end. Let us now conclude this analysis. We have already seen that the principles of neuroscience are fundamental. Simulate walking, many repetitions, focus and effort, cardiorespiratory, and especially the protection and workload of physiotherapists. In summary, the key point is to analyze the cost-benefit and determine which technology is the most convenient for your health center. To simplify this decision, we have created comparative formats that we can share with you that allow you to evaluate various value options, suppliers, technology, always under the three main blocks. The principle of neuroscience, how much each team manages to replicate them. Cardiorespiratory training, i.e. intensity, adaptation, exercise parameters, and the working and practice environment, i.e. initial investment, annual contracts, usability. Patient diversity, return on investment, therapist experience. Each aspect is graded on a scale from 1 to 100 objectively, the various alternatives. In this way, your center can make the best clear, detailed, and informed decision, choosing the best technology for your patients. I hope that if you have any curiosity or questions, please contact me. Here are my contact details. And before I say goodbye, I want to thank you most sincerely for your time.